I got a story to tell. This is a good one. Just let me tell it real quick.
No, you
Just
sit
down for a minute.
Ow! Ow!
Yeah, you hit your head. Let me see your shirt. Let me see your shirt. Your appropriate T-shirt. Let me see it. Okay. I have a story to tell, but you're not gonna let me tell it already. She's around. Anyway, I'll tell the story anyway. So I'll have to tell it to Linda. When I was 13 years old, I took different classes at the age of 13. I believe it was 7th grade. So I was in a remedial reading class where we had to touch up on our reading, and it was to focus on how to read, okay? Then I was in a regular English class where we read The Outsiders, which was the Hinton book. It was a female author, and it was the one that Tom Cruise and Emilio Estevez and Francis Ford Coppola directed. We saw the movie and we watched the book, which I thought was a great idea. I don't remember which we did first, though. I think we read some of the book, and then we watched the movie, and then we read the rest of the book. I think we read the whole book. And then also I was like a biology, like health class, or it was maybe a biology class. I think it was a biology class that was very difficult. And the teacher was kind of a redneck. He was a coach, and he dipped snuff, and he would try to do it secretly. And you could smell the snuff in the room, but he would dip, and he had a place where he'd spit. And he was a biology teacher. I didn't do very good in it. And my dad had written a letter, all in capital letters with a pencil. It was a letter my dad wrote to that teacher saying that if I failed, I would not be able to go on this hunting trip. And then later on, I ended up passing that class. And we had all these weird classes. And there was another class that was a home ec class. We learned how to do like eggs. We'd crack eggs and do like, the thing where you make an omelet. I remember making an omelet. And you learn how to cook and using a real cook book, and then we'd look at the cookbook, and then we had a range. It was an oven top and it was a stove. It was a stove top, and then also an oven. And I don't know if we even had a microwave. This is back very mid 80s or so. I was, like I said, 13. So probably maybe close to 83 or 84. And in the cafeteria, we only ate soy burgers. We could get some meat, some sausage and stuff for breakfast. But if it came to a hamburger, we ate soy burgers with French fries that were usually like crinkle fries that were not always the best, but you could put melted cheese on them. But anyway, what the story I'm getting to is we had all these different classes. We had physical education, which was pretty strenuous. And this is the age of 13. We were working out with free weights, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of stuff. They had us on free weights, doing bench press, curls, and it was stressed that we did these things. And also the coaches stressed that we only use free weights throughout our life and to stay away from the machine weights. We also, if we got into a fight, we were ordered to go into the locker rooms and to physically fight with gloves in front of the coaches until the two that fought on campus had enough of it. Meaning they'd make them fight so much that we were done fighting. Now, I had gotten in a fight where it was so bad. Now, this is not in the locker room where the coaches were, where we wore gloves, but without gloves. And it was after I had eaten a croissant sausage thing that was smothered in liquefied cheese sauce. That they would make. And so what my friend would do is he had this down jacket. It was a hunting jacket. He would stick like 4 or 5 of them in his jacket. He'd steal them. And he'd go into the lunchroom and he'd pass them out to his friends. And I remember I had eaten one of them, and he had poured some of this cheese sauce on it. It was really good. It was really hot. And it was like a ham sandwich with egg, and I had eaten like 2 of them, right? And I was really full, and I was only 13. And right then, everything in the cafeteria kind of changed. it became kind of louder, and I really liked this sausage thing. I was eating it, and it was making me kind of happy. And there was a guy named Neely Norrell, and he was a free bleeder. He was a hemophiliac. He was also kind of almost a sociopath. And he would stage these fights. So he would get people to fight in front of him. So he had walked over to me, and all of a sudden it was like I was in the spotlight. And he said, Ryan called you a pussy. And I knew something was going on, and I was the center of attention, because you just kind of know that when you're a kid. Everyone was looking at me, and I was in the limelight. Everyone was looking at me, and the guy's name was Ryan Beavers. His dad had taught him to box, so his dad taught him to box by hitting this wood. This is what I heard, but it was like a wood plank. He was hitting wood plank at home. And I did a little boxing. My dad got me boxing gloves, and me and my sister would box and stuff. But, the guy, Neely, said, he called you a pussy. What are you going to do, And I just was real quiet. I was sitting there just kind of contemplating, like, what should I do? He called me a pussy. He said, well, are you going to fight him? And everyone was looking, and they were thinking, hang on, I got to tell a story. And I decided, I'm going to have to fight this guy. So they took everything out of the cafeteria and brought everything back behind this little area of the school, kind of right before the football field, which is kind of an open area parking lot. Why the teachers wouldn't have came in there and stopped it, which never happened, And I think it's mostly because all the kids would get into a big circle, and the fight would happen within the circle, and you could not see in the middle, but you could hear that there was commotion. So they took me out into the circle, and there wasn't a lot of kids there when we first got there. So it was just me. Ryan Beavers was there. He had his jacket on, his other down jacket, and I had just saw like Rocky 1, 2, and 3. My dad had showed me Rocky 1, 2, and 3.
Story time.
Hang on. And
story times.
So I was thinking of Rocky, like Rocky Balboa, but I was thinking like, and I knew Taekwondo, so I had been trained a little bit in Taekwondo. I'd taken a few classes in Taekwondo, so I figured, I'm probably going to have to kick this guy, try to knock him out or something, and kick him in the chin, and see if I could do it. Neely was there. He was kind of like the manager. He's like, all right, you two are going to fight. Let's go. And like, he's literally, snapping his fingers so we'd start fighting. So, I'm sitting there saying, come on, like this or whatever. And, he was just kind of standing there, not really in a defensive mode, because for one thing, he was from a Christian family. His whole family was a Christian family. And I pretty much was too. My grandma was a big Baptist and everything. But anyway, why we were fighting was mostly because Neely wanted us to fight, and no one fought Neely, because Neely could go up to anybody in the school. It didn't matter who, not the teachers, but he'd go to any peer student and punch him in the face. They couldn't hit him or anything because they'd kill him, because he was a hemophiliac. So Neely was in charge of it, and Ryan was just sitting there. And so, I went up and punched Ryan in the face, So I punched him, and it did cause him to have a little black eye later on. And then I went to go punch him again, and he countered and punched me, probably in the same area of the eye. And I was about 13 then. So it started. Then he put his dukes up, and I put my dukes up, and we began doing this thing. Now I'd go up close to punch again, and he would punch me again. Now part of me thinks that I was putting on a show to get punched. And I think I was doing this. So I'd approach him again, and then he'd punch me again, because I was trying to reenact Rocky 3, where Mr. T beats the crap out of Sylvester Stallone, or he beats in the very beginning. Actually, no, it's Creed. He kills Creed. Yeah, Mr. T kills Creed. But Rocky later fights Mr. T and takes him full on. Just tells him, just keep hitting me to wear him down. Well, we reenact the scene, but we really did it. we weren't talking about Rocky, but we knew what we were doing. And everyone was watching, cheering, and they loved it. And he kept hitting me over and over. And I kept coming to counter, and it got serious. It got to the point where I could barely see out of this part of my eye. You know, it's like it got so puffy. Well, finally, I threw a few kicks at him. So I did a few like karate kicks at him, but missed, luckily, you know, because I probably would have knocked him out. And then eventually he got so mad at me and he kept hitting me that he had jumped on top of me and was pummeling me, you know, almost to the point where he was going to kill me. And this guy named Jeff Keys, I remember all their names. Jeff Keys was literally the biggest, strongest guy in the school. Now, he wasn't the tallest. There was a guy that was taller than him that was his family were a family of wrestlers that had trained Eric Von Erich, or the Von Erichs. You know, Eric Von Erich and all the Von Erichs were trained by this guy's dad. Now, he was mean to me. This guy actually tried to choke me one time a while back. This is a different story. He could have stopped the fight, or Jeff Keys could have. Now, Jeff Keys was kind of a, level-headed guy that was logical and, you know, didn't want to see this one guy kill this other guy. So he went over and grabbed Ryan, picked him up, and said, okay, that's enough, and pull him in. He wouldn't mess with Jeff Keys. Jeff Keys would knock him out, and it would be over. Jeff Keys could probably knock out some of the coaches. Back then, he could have been the quarterback, but I think he was a quarterback at times, sometimes, but I think he was maybe like a tight end or something like that. They had him in a linebacker, I think a linebacker position. They just give him the ball and he'd knock everybody down and make a touchdown. But anyway, he grabbed this guy, Ryan Beavers, and pulled him off of me. So that was enough. And my eye was, at this point, swollen shut. I couldn't see through it. And it was black and swollen shut and everything. The fight's over. You know, they raised Ryan's hand. Ryan won. I went, and they said, go look at your eye, you know. So I went and looked in my eye in a rearview mirror, and like a truck, you know, there was a truck parked, and it was like, it looked bad. And then I remember walking back to where the main cafeteria was, because the bell had rung. We all had to go to class. I went to the bathroom to look at my eye again, and I saw this one chick, Christy Wright, that I had liked, and she seemed kind of upset about it. And someone had yelled, you know, Cole Spivey got his ass kicked. And I heard her say, no, he didn't, you know, but she obviously could say that I did. But she was right. Christy was right. I actually didn't get my ass kicked because I broke his hand with my eye socket, because he kept hitting me so much that he broke his hand. And that day I had to go to the hospital. I didn't go to the hospital, but he actually went to the hospital because he broke his hand on my face. Now, this is a true story. Now, I think eventually I would end up into the principal's office just to go in there and confess what happened. And, you know, that I had gotten this fight, and I was just honest. You know, I went in there and we fought, and I didn't lie about it. And it all got to my dad, and my dad saw what happened, and my dad started training me how to defend myself a little bit better and stuff. But that's not really the story that I wanted to tell. That's just a story that kind of came into the main story. But bullying was pretty big in the school. But we found ways to defend ourselves, and we split up into two different groups. There was a skateboarder group, and there was the hit group, like the cowboy or redneck groups. And the skateboarders would bring things like fireworks, Chinese stars, you know, those things that are, nunchucks, sais, you know, weaponry, you know. And the cowboys would bring like whips and things like that. They'd bring like bull whips and stuff, because they knew that the skateboarders would never use their Chinese stars against them, because that would kill them. But the skateboarders would bring a lot of weaponry, but they never really use it. Not even the fireworks. Usually they just get their butts kicked, which was sad. They just threatened, like, we have this weaponry, you know, we have these fireworks. We'd hear about it, or stink bomb would go off, or smoke bomb or something would go off. And they would, you know, pull the fire alarm. Everybody would have to leave the school, you know. But the cowboys and the skateboarders would fight, and I think it was we called them ropers, or we called them shit kickers or ropers, and sometimes they would wear like long like trench coats. There were trench coats that were starting to be introduced to the school, but the trench coat mafia and all that stuff didn't come until I was in college. And that was when eventually Columbine had happened and things had gotten really bad. But some of that was in the school in junior high, but no one had ever really brought a gun, and none of that like mass shooting stuff was very popular at all. Not in the 80s, not in the mid 80s or like 84. But there was a story where a kid had got in front of the English class and shot himself. And I think the lead singer of Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, sang about that. So that had happened like sometime in the late 80s or something. But what ended up happening was I was in this art class, and there was a guy in there named Josh Cruz who's from California. And the teacher there had, she would give instructions, and she would paint in front of us, and she would do watercolors, and she would try to teach us, how to break down an image and draw it correctly. And Josh Cruz was like a great drawer. He probably was became like a tattoo artist or something like that. But he was from California, and he was very emotional. And I was forced to sit at his table. And he was the meanest guy that I'd ever really met. He was just ferociously mean. And he was a crazy fighter too. He'd flip out and try to gouge people's eyes out and stuff. But anyway, I had to sit there throughout many days, and he would get like right in my face, and he'd be like, "I'm gonna freaking kill you. I'll rip your hair out. I'm gonna scratch your eyes out." He didn't want us to be able to focus and draw or paint or anything. And he'd get like right in, like your face, like right there in the table. He's like, I'm gonna rip your eyes out. I'm gonna, and it was weird. And he'd get serious about it. Like he was really gonna, I'm gonna stab you with this pencil, And you're just sitting there going, I was like shaking. So I went up to Miss Norrell. I think her name was Miss Norrell. I want to say that was her name. And I said, Josh is threatening to kill me, Josh Cruz. And she's like, go sit down, do your work. I'm like, but he's threatening to kill me. So I'd go back, to the table and sit down and try to draw or whatever. But it was absurd to try to sit there and draw when I knew this guy could like stab me with his pencil, And he would be sitting there drawing, and then I would look at the paper, and he would look at me, and and he'd be like, I'm going to tear your hair out. I'll bite you, I'll bite you in the neck and cause you to bleed to death, I'll bite your aorta. I don't know if you knew that word. And he got to the point where, I had to sit there. I couldn't leave the class. Miss Norrell wouldn't let me leave the class. So I had to face death and sit there at this table because I knew this guy was probably going to take the scissors and stab me. Yeah, I think he threatened to stab me with the scissors and stuff like that. He had an emotional problem. Josh Cruz did. It was an emotional problem. So Mrs. Norrell, dismissed the class one day, and Josh had got so mad at something that was said. And I was the first to get to the door, to leave, to get away from him. I was forced to sit at the table. I had to be near him. But once the bell rung, I would get up and run to the door to get, as fast as I could to get away, physically to get away, because I didn't want to get stabbed by some scissors. And nor was I able to do my work or concentrate. But by the time we got out of the classroom, Josh Cruz had got so mad that he started crying, like these sobbing, these tears, telling everyone around him that he was going to kill everybody, like, I am going to kill you. I'll kill your family. I'll kill your mother. He was yelling and screaming. Everyone was like, what is wrong with this guy? So some of the bigger guys in the school had come to that art room, even though they were in another room as he was getting out, just to watch him, and kind of laugh at him a little bit and stuff, because they could beat him up. He wasn't as big as they were. He had this curly hair, and he was, but he was just threatened to be there. He was from California. I remember he was from California. But the reason why I tell a story is because it always made me think, like, how could a teacher allow that to happen? But I think the reason why is because that was the beginning stages of what was called inclusion. And inclusion is now becoming kind of a state law, because what it does is it teaches the special kid, whether it be emotional problems or an emotional disorder, or it teaches a kid that might have a learning disability, or just to be slower than the other kids, if you want to say slower or faster, if it's ADHD or ADHD, attention disorder, or hyperactive. It teaches them not only to be involved with normal, regular students, but also to be included in the classroom, where in most cases they would just be in a special ed room. So it takes them out of the special education room and it puts them in like normal society, or it puts them in the normal workforce, or you could say the normal classroom, because the school is a microcosm for, society. So that's probably why he was there. That's probably why I had to sit next to him, and that's probably why I experienced it. Now later on, I would become a substitute teacher where I would teach a special ed class for about 2 weeks, and they still would practice inclusion. So what they would do is they would take these kids and they would wheelchair them. Some of them were in wheelchairs, or someone had to be fed a special way, and they would push them into these classrooms, and they would sit there, and sometimes they would raise their hands, even if they were extremely autistic or something like that, and they would participate with the teacher in the classroom, and the other class would oddly turn and look, and have to include them into their lesson plan. And not only their lesson plan, but into their normal life. And sometimes they'd even become friends with them and stuff and know them by name, so that they were physically being included, as well as mentally and spiritually included into the microcosm or into society. Because a school is not necessarily society. A public school or even a private school is not necessarily society, but it represents society. So these young kids that have learning disabilities could start to learn that there's a possibility that after school that they could participate in society. And that's why inclusion is important. And I think the story is about inclusion, because I think in one way or another, all these stories have to do with special kids that are trying to fight their way into just regular society, to try to belong, and to function. And of course, also to make money and to eventually, hopefully one day become rich. Because if you're a good person and you have money, then usually how to I guess you could say, spend that money, because ideally what teachers want is, in schools, is they want people to be able to go out there and make money so they can provide for themselves and their family. So art, because I mentioned the art classroom is a way to make money, but in all those subjects that you're taught, whether it be English, reading, writing, arithmetic, math, science, art, physical education, all of that's designed so that you can go out and provide for yourself and others. It's a way so that you can use those skills in society to reach other people and to provide, to be a provider, and also to be a protector too. So you can use these types of skills to succeed. And the stories, I think, that you tell are there and designed to help form those skills, and also to help express your own identity, and to progress too. Ultimately, I think what school is it's about learning to progress. I got another message I gotta go. I'll get back with you though.